Welcome back to another episode of We Don't Know What to Watch, the podcast about two guys who watch stuff thanks to a magic algorithm on a website. And with me is the Roger Murtaugh to my Martin Riggs.
And I am not too old for this shit.
You are very old. That's Kyle Mulford, and I'm Noah Saturn. I don't have any fan fiction to read you this time, so
that's okay. I don't need you ruining any more of my childhood cartoons.
I was taking out my notebook to take notes for this movie, and it was the fan fiction was still tucked in there.
And I read it before bed every night.
Every night.
So, what did we watch this time?
Well, if you can tell, we watched a movie about cops, but not just any movie. We watched The Wonderful Marvelous, the 2007 comedy masterpiece, Hot Fuzz.
Sergeant Nicholas Angel, expert in hand-to-hand combat, armed response, and high-speed pursuit. He was so good, they reassigned him.
Right. You've been making us all look bad. There's one thing you haven't taken into account, and that's what the team is going to make of this.
And it is a masterpiece. So, spoilers, now you know what we'll rate it at the end.
Yeah, it's
a masterpiece.
It's good.
It's all right.
It's really good.
This is the second movie in a trilogy. However, trilogy is a loose term.
It's more of a trilogy in the sense that it pairs the same director and same two stars in each film. It's the Three Flavors of Cornetto trilogy.
And they they're just kind of spoofing certain genres of movies, but I'll get into that because I don't know if I consider Hot Fuzz a true spoof.
It's not a parody film in the same way that, say, something like Airplane.
Yeah, or Naked Gun would be, or
anything in that school. This is definitely more of just an homage to just sort of police action movies in a comedy sense, in the same way that the previous film in the trilogy, Shaun of the Dead, is a zombie movie that just happens to be a comedy.
Yeah, and the one link that they have besides the director and actors is there is at least one scene. There's a lot of gags that go throughout each movie, but there's at least one scene where a Cornetto is displayed in the movie. I think it's a red wrappered Cornetto with a strawberry or cherry flavor in Shaun of the Dead to represent the blood from zombie movies. And then in this one, it's a blue one, which I don't remember the flavor, but
probably like blueberry or something.
Yeah,
like
blueberry.
That.
It's a blue wrapper to represent that it's a cop movie. And then in the next one in 2013 was The World's End. I always get that mixed up with what was that one comedy with
This is the end. It came out the same year, so
yeah. So The World's End, which is about sci-fi and aliens and stuff. So it's a green mint flavored one. So, and a Cornetto is just basically a kind of ice cream.
It's an ice cream treat. Sold worldwide, so you could probably get it somewhere.
And I think it's just called different things in different locations.
Yeah, but Cornetto is sort of the name of the brand.
Yeah. But anyway, that means that being the second movie doesn't mean you have to watch the other movies, although you should at least watch Shaun of the Dead. I'm going to say that The World's End I just didn't enjoy it as much as these two.
I think that one really deserves, I think people should look at it more because there was a significant gap between Hot Fuzz and between World's End, but I still think it's a great movie and it's a lot of fun.
I thought it was good. It didn't have that classic feel to me. Like Shaun of the Dead is just a wonderful movie. And actually, Shaun of the Dead is the one that most people prefer in this trilogy. I am of the minority that thinks that Hot Fuzz is the better movie of the trilogy.
I think that they're all great for different reasons. One, because, The World's End is great just because it has, there's a lot of great jokes. And it has a great ensemble cast. Well, this one is definitely more focused on the core dynamic between Simon Pegg playing Nicholas Angel and then Sam and then Danny Frankbottom played by Nick Frost.
Danny, what was it,
Butterbomb, or what is Frank Bottom? I don't know. Something Bottom.
Bottom.
Naked Bottom. I don't know.
Something Bottom. Anyway, this movie, it starts off with this whole montage of Nicholas Angel played by Simon Pegg. He's a London cop, and he's like the best guy on the force.
He is your prototypical super cop.
Yeah, and he does everything perfect. It shows him like playing chess and beating everybody. Shows him like doing physical activities and beating everybody. He has the most arrests in London, and he gets called into the
he gets called into Sergeant's office because he's a beat cop, and his sergeant is played by Martin Freeman of The Office UK, and more recently of note in the television show Sherlock on the BBC, and of course the Hobbit trilogy. So
yes, so
there's a lot of more famous faces than you might think in this.
Yeah, and so he calls him in and basically says, dude, you're too good at your job, so we're going to move you to this small countryside. And so Simon
what?
Pegg is like, I know, he was looking for a promotion. He's like, no, I want to do more. And so the guy goes, okay, well, do we need to get the inspector in here? So they call in the inspector, played by Steve Coogan.
But what's fun is there's a lot of repetition and rule of three in this film, and this is one thing I noticed is that, like, do you want me to call the inspector? And then he says, yeah. He's kind of stare, dramatic sound build up, dials the phone, and then, sort of.
Yeah. Well, and then
then Steve
third
Coogan comes up and says, like,
and he does the same thing, only like he's like, do we really want to call him in? Like, yes. What?
Dramatic stare, look at the phone, and they just yell.
And he's around the corner, and it's Bill Nighy comes in as the chief inspector, and they're all like, well, yeah, you're going to this small town, and he's like, well, we'll have to see what the the rest of the police force has to say about it. He walks out and they're like, congratulations on your move. Good luck.
You may not like this. He obviously doesn't want to go. He's like, but then we'll have to figure out what the team thinks. And he just very dramatic walks up and then looks, and they're just kind of stare at him and says, like, good luck, Nick, or something like that.
And this is one of the things where I said it's not really a spoof movie. It's more of just like, it's lovingly like showing all of the tropes and doing all of the tropes, but in a loving way, because it's like they like the cop movies, and it's like they're pointing them out, but they're doing it in a fun way.
Yes.
And
it's very postmodern in that sense, because it's more of a deconstruction of what cop movies are and how they work and why some things work and even why they are ridiculous. But then at the same time, it's still fun, because then by the end of the movie, it still has engaged in just about every sort of action or movie or cop movie cliche.
And the fun thing is it's still a comedy, and since it's not a spoof, it like kind of reverses your expectations, because in most spoof movies that are doing something like this, the super cop is actually going to be like accidentally good at everything. And I was the first time I watched this, I thought that's where it was going to go, because it was just going to be like this funny movie about cops and all the tropes and everything. And he's going to be really good, but he's going to stumble onto all this stuff, and he's going to be wrong about stuff, but like somehow stumble into the right things anyway. And no, in this movie, he's literally right about everything, and he is literally good at everything.
He is great at his job. He is sort of this by the book super cop that you'd see in like, I don't know, like SVU or something. So,
and he's so by the book that it's like ruined his relationship with his girlfriend, which I didn't know until I looked it up afterwards, that because you never see her face because she's at a crime scene investigating, and she's got a mask on, but it's played by Cate Blanchett.
Yeah, she's in like a sort of a CSI or whatever, almost hazmat sort of thing, doesn't want to get anything dirty with evidence, and then he's just, it's so great. I don't know how they got so many, I guess, famous faces in this film, just even in like these goofier bit parts. So
yeah, there's a lot of great cast, because there's even Peter Jackson, who later hires Martin Freeman for The Hobbit. He plays the Santa who stabs Simon Pegg, and it's just a flashback that actually is about 2 seconds or you'll miss it.
Yeah, and then we go back to sort of the talking to the three different bosses. It's just like they all ask the same question: how's the hand? Still a little stiff. And Steve Coogan comes up: how's the hand? Yeah, still a little stiff. And then Bill Nighy comes in: how's the hand? Still a little stiff.
So he gets transferred to this little country town, and the first thing he does is he goes to a hotel where he's going to stay. And this is one of my favorite scenes with the clerk and the lady who runs the hotel.
Like Joyce, I believe is her name.
Yeah, Joyce, and her husband is just sitting on the chair out there, and he goes, "I'm staying here," and she goes, "Well, you're always here," because she never looks up, so thinks she's talking to her husband.
You'll never leave. You're always here.
You never leave. You're always here.
Excuse me. Oh.
But she looks up and then she just screams, "Fascist!" And she's doing a crossword puzzle, and it's a great gag.
What'd you say? Oh, I mean, a system of government. It's 17 across. Oh, fascism. Yeah. Thank you.
And then he's just having a conversation, and then eventually he just goes, "hag," at the end of one of his phrases or one of his sentences, and she's like, "Excuse me." The 3 down, like a wicked lady or whatever, 3 letters, and it's hag. So and this is another great thing about this movie that makes this kind of perfect is how tight everything is, written and acted and everything, because nothing is wasted in this movie.
There is not a wasted shot in this entire film.
Everything that you see in this movie is going to be played off at some point later in the film. So any bit of dialogue you hear, you have the fascist and the hag. That comes up later, and it's a great callback. And then there's actually one. I'll actually get to the other one later because it's spoils like the end of it. But he's there and meets the hotel owner, and then he goes decides to go
room,
and how he
looks there, gets kind of sad, and then it's like, well, what are you doing in town? You go to a bar, and then he starts.
Yeah, he goes to the local pub, and that's how he meets Nick Frost.
Yeah, so Danny is the character. So then
he's just a drunk.
Yeah, he's just like a guy in the background. You think nothing of it except you know who he is. So come up later just because of the actor. But at the moment, he's just like a drunk guy.
And he eventually tries to drive home drunk, and so Simon Pegg arrests him.
Before that, we have the sort of the classic scene where he's looking at us like, "What can I get you, sir?" Cranberry juice. He sits there and he's reading the paper, looking at things, and he sees like all these 3 different groups of kids laughing, and then one of them is just like it's these kids and they're supposed to be underage. So one of them is they're drinking like beer out of straws.
Oh, I actually missed that.
Yeah, it's a super quick gag just when he's looking at him.
That's another thing is that I've seen this movie probably 4 or 5 times, and I rewatched it again before doing this, and I still caught things that I never caught before because there's a lot of background stuff too that is just great. When he eventually goes to the police station, if you notice when they're like going around the table and stuff, there's one guy with glasses, and I can't remember the actor's name and actually even the character's name. He's the one who doesn't know what to do in situations.
Yeah, that's Tony.
So what do we do? What do we do here? He goes, well, we need to put a cordon off, and we need to wait for the ambulances to come, and blah blah blah. But that guy's sitting at the table, and there's a chart behind him, and there's something in the center that his head is blocking. So then there's a bunch of arrows pointing in. It says disloyal, dishonest, just all these bad terms just pointing at his head, and it's just like a little throwaway background gag when you see his
That's fun. I didn't even notice that. I believe that's Tony Fox is his character's name.
Yeah, so there's great little gags like that.
And so much of this film is visual, and it's very visual, and its humor is very visual, and its jokes, including the scene that we were just talking about where he's going, he goes up, he looks, of course, very dramatic lighting cue where he just kind of sort of sees the flash in his eyes, looks at the 3 groups of kids, and then he just and see one of them even has braces on. So then he looks, then sort of zoom in on a sign at the bar that says people under 18 cannot be served here. Then he goes up, takes out his badge. He just says, "Can I have your ages?" It's like you. When's your birthday? February 22nd. What year? Every year.
One of them was I don't remember what month. He
May
said
12th, 1969. So you're 37. And then the third one, this is again, it's sort of that rule of 3 in comedy, which is first one, what's your birthday? Every year. Second one, you're 37. Third one, kid just goes, ah!
I know the rule of 3rd and everything, and that's something I never picked up on in this movie also, and that's another thing I need to go back and watch, and now that you mentioned that, I'm thinking of all the jokes. I go, yeah, they honestly did go.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3.
The 1, 2, 3 punch every time.
And it makes, especially in a lot of the edits, there is very much sort of a 1, 2, 3. Matter of fact, the editing is very quick, but you never feel lost. You always know what's going on, which is different from, say, something like, I hate to say it, something like, Michael Bay Transformers movie where he just doesn't really care. So they just
and it's just cut. There's
a famous, or almost infamous scene If you've ever seen it, it's from like whatever that Liam Neeson was, like something. The Liam Neeson series, I'll find you, I will kill you, whatever.
Taken?
Yeah, it's from Taken 3.
Oh, I've seen this breakdown before.
Yeah, Brian Mills jumps a fence is sort of this YouTube clip, and it's like 16 or 17 cuts.
Just to jump over a fence.
Just for him to jump over a fence.
And
so much of that is wasted.
And good action editing is going to be one wide shot, so you can see what's going on, whereas like that shot of him jumping over the fence is cut so often because they need to cut the fact that he's not, like, he's an older actor. He's probably taking a lot of time to get over. So it's like, okay, well, we'll do it again now and now do this part quick, and just kind of cut it together. Whereas you should really back it up. Whereas this movie, there's a lot of quick edits, but that's in the in-between scenes when they're going from one scene to another instead of dissolving or just cutting. It's like a series of quick shots indicating where they're going with the next thing.
And it still gives you enough time to absorb the visual information and then go on to the next scene. And that's even like sneaks in some jokes there. I know one of the big transitions is going from London to Sanford. Starts out taxi sign, modern looking taxi sign, goes down train station. There's always a sound. Cut. Cut. Into train. Always facing forward, looking sad. Looks at his phone. Bars go down. Very fast cuts. Train station. Up to train station. Old-timey taxi. Boom. Hotel. And it's still funny because you know exactly what's going on, but it's funny just because every cut is just slightly jarring.
And there's actually another great one that I really enjoyed, but it's a little bit later on. But I don't want to get to that quite yet. Because first, okay, so we see him shoo out all the kids from the bar, and then the bar is empty because that's all
just him reading the paper and drinking his cranberry juice.
And then you get the overlying theme of the movie right there is the bartenders. He yells at the bartenders, going, "They're underage. They shouldn't be drinking." And they go, "Well, it means they're off the streets, and it's for the greater good of the community."
Greater good.
And every time they say the greater good in this movie, it's always repeated again. No one ever says it just like once without a repeat. Someone will say it, and someone else in the background will repeat it. The greater good. Mm-hmm. So that's a theme that goes throughout the whole movie. So then after that, he arrests Nick Frost and puts him in jail. And then the next morning he goes to look for him, and he goes, "The cell's empty." Nick Frost comes up behind him. "Who are we looking for?" And that's a classic joke. It's been in so many movies, but it works.
Still works. And I think it works because of Nick Frost's like earnest, he's very good at doing sort of this wide-eyed, almost innocent sort of look, like, "Who? Where? Who was there?"
They play really well off of each other because Danny, Nick Frost, has to play it really naive in this movie. So naive that at the end he's like still clueless, even though he sees what's happening. And so they take a tour of the station, and this is great because it's another threes because they show he just opens doors. There's a locker room. It's just a mess. And then was it the evidence room or was the evidence room next?
Yeah.
And he opens the evidence room door, and there's nothing in there. It's just empty, like there are no crimes in this town. And then what was the third door was... I
believe that was the Neighborhood Watch Alliance.
Okay, I thought there was another thing too, but...
It might have been first door...
Was the locker room.
Yeah, first door was like in the Andes at one point.
Oh, and that was when they were introducing like all the people. Yeah. Then they did the NWA, but there was 3 rooms that didn't have any people in them. It was the locker room, and then something else, and then an empty evidence room, which was great. Yeah, and then they meet like all the cops, and you got the 2 Andys, and then you got Tony, and then there's an older gentleman who just mumbles.
Yeah.
And which one is the one that just says obscene things? Because there's also Olivia Colman plays Doris.
Yeah.
And I read a trivia thing about that was like a long time ago when a woman did become a cop, like I don't know if it was just in Britain or what, they were called. They didn't actually call them by their name. They called them all Doris. Apparently, I don't know if that's a real thing or if that IMDb sometimes you're iffy on their facts about a movie. But I was like, okay, that's interesting. But that would be an attention to detail that they would have put in this, because
Yes.
they don't put anything, like we said, they don't waste anything.
And don't forget the swear box.
Oh, the swear box.
I like the swear box. That comes into play a few times in the film.
All of the words are kind of asterisked out, or like, like the little symbols you see in comics, except for the worst word is just spelled out.
Yeah. Which I think that particular word, especially in the UK and in Scotland and Ireland,
is really...
It means different things than it means here. We're not going to say it.
Yeah, it's not a word I need to say.
You know the scene we're talking about.
Yeah. So they going around, and Nick Frost starts asking all these cliche questions about cops because he loves cop movies, and Simon Pegg is like, I haven't watched any of those. He goes, you haven't seen Point Break or Bad Boys 2, which are the two movies they always go back to in this, and and he's like, no. Have you ever fired 2 guns while jumping in the air? No.
Have you fired 1 gun while jumping in the air?
It just keeps going on with all of these different cliches, and again, that's all dialogue that later is going to be done in the movie, because you know that they're going to use all these cliches that they're pointing out at the beginning of the movie.
And one thing we forgot to mention was sort of there's a few montages in this film. I think Edgar Wright, just the director, likes to use montages.
Yes.
And the montages, there's like booking people montage. There's a few of those. And then there's also he uses montages, but they're all funny. They're always funny.
Yeah.
He's very good at synchronizing his editing to his music, which of course he does a ton later in Baby Driver.
Yes, and if you haven't seen Baby Driver, if you want like a masterpiece in editing, that is your movie to watch.
Yeah, I read might have perused like an interesting article with the editor of Baby Driver, and he was actually on set, which is very rare for an editor. Something they don't do a lot. He was on set, seeing things go, looking at the dailies and everything like that. So, which is
and you would
very unique.
Like, for as much detail as Edgar Wright puts into his editing, the editor almost has to be there, especially for that opening scene in Baby Driver where he's walking to the music and it's all one cut, and he's got to hit every spot perfect with that whole thing, and it's an amazing scene. It's so well choreographed. But
anyway, back to Hot Fuzz. A different kind of action movie.
Then we start seeing like different characters in the town. When he was out running, he gets...
Yeah, this was before he goes into police station that morning.
He runs into Skinner, played by...
Simon Skinner, played by Timothy Dalton.
And
Timothy
like
Dalton's
the
out
smarmy
running
guy
too.
with the smarmy mustache.
And he just goes like, hey, arrest me. I'm a slasher.
I'm a slasher. I slash prices. My prices are so low, they're criminal. And yes, those are cheesy lines, but again, they're pulled off so well in this movie.
Yes. You can tell Timothy Dalton is having a blast.
And you can tell right away, this is another one where it's like, they don't even put in a MacGuffin in this movie. You can tell when someone's not a good person, and at the end of the movie, they're not a good person. It's just put out there. And that's where he's like just going, well, heck with your expectations. You're expecting me to put out like stuff to throw you off. I'm not going to throw you off. I'm just going to give it all to you right now, and you know what's going to happen. And then, that seems so obvious that at the end you're like, oh, it really was that obvious.
Yeah, sometimes you can get away with like you're really going the obvious route, but then when the director says yes, sometimes you're still even like caught off guard.
Yeah. Because there's even more, because and yes, this movie is going to get spoiled because you can't talk about it without spoiling a little bit. So if you haven't watched it, pause it and go watch it because it's a masterpiece.
Yes.
But basically everyone half the town is bad guys. So like that's where you're watching the movie going, okay, well, this guy seems like a bad guy, but maybe that guy is too. But maybe that guy is. So which one is it going to be? Oh, it's all of them.
Yeah, it almost does the spoiler alert for a book from the 40s, but it's almost it kind of does the Murder on the Orient Express sort of thing.
Oh yeah,
like who killed this person? It's like, well, they all did it, you know.
And yes, that is like a 40-year-old book. It's not just a 2018 movie.
17.
17. Well, it was also a 1970s
It's a pretty good adaptation,
movie.
Yeah. And a BBC movie, and probably a play.
It's been adapted a lot. But so everyone who looks guilty is basically guilty. And one of my favorites is is this when a murder has already happened now? Because they
No, this
pull
is
over
before-
Mr. Blower.
Yeah.
And his girlfriend or
Yes.
his mistress or whatever, and they're in the local play.
What are you doing? Writing everything down. It's like, well, stop writing. Just stop writing.
He just
It's a great
starts
little
writing,
scene.
stop writing.
Exactly. It's like, well, I just want you to know everything you can and say, well, blah, blah, blah. Goes through sort of the Miranda rights spiel for this speeding ticket. And all this time, there's just very much sort of character building. There's even sort of a montage of basic policing before any of this happens. Of course, then there's one of my favorite plot elements that keeps coming back is the Swan.
Yeah.
Because when he's just sitting in the station doing work, it's just like, let's see. Peter, Ian Sticker, your Swan's gone missing? Uh-huh. Yo, I see P.I. Sticker. I get it. Piss Sticker.
And all the names that you think are jokes, he thinks are jokes too.
Oh, I get it.
And then he's like,
Piss
oh.
Sticker. Oh, okay. And then it just does a hard cut. It's like, and what were you saying, Mr.
Yeah.
Mr. Sticker? What was his, let's see, his swan about 2 feet tall? It's a swan.
Any other details? It's a swan.
Yes. And the swan keeps coming up throughout the film.
And again, not wasted because it plays a major role at the end of the movie, which is fantastic.
It's very good at Chekhov's gun, but in this case, it almost feels like Chekhov's machine guns because they just put in so many seeds and then they're all used.
Which,
by the end
speaking
the
of
movie.
Chekhov's machine guns, they go to this mumbler's house because someone has a complaint that he's trimming someone's hedges, and he goes. So they take the mumbler cop to translate
Yes.
the mumbling
And the
old
dog.
man, and yeah, and
I forget what that actor's name is, but he's been in so many things. He's probably more famous for playing like Filch, the janitor in Harry Potter, but he's one of those British actors who's just been working for a very long time. It's sort of a very visually distinctive look, but it kind of works for it in a Steve Buscemi sort of way.
yeah, and there's a lot of British actors who've been around a long time. Like Jim Broadbent plays Danny's dad, who is the chief inspector of the town.
Yeah, who's
And so they go, and this guy, they go because he has been trimming someone's hedges, and then he tries to get the cops off the lawn, and he pulls a gun on them. And,
like, "No."
and that was a great joke, too. He goes, do you have a permit for that? Yeah, for this one. They're like, what do you mean for this one?
But then again, there's another rule of 3. So then this goes like, he does his mumbling, her. It's like, what did he say? Police guy mumbles, da. What did he say? And then Nick Frost tells
Nick
Simon.
Frost has to translate
It's like,
the
yeah, so there's
mumbler
another-
who's translating the mumbler.
There's another rule of 3.
But then he's like, well, I've got one for this one. What do you mean this one? And then they go break into his barn, and there is an arsenal big enough for like a small country. And there's even like a sea mine in there.
Yes. And then even that is foreshadowed earlier when they said, I think it's when he was talking to one of the Andes, there's more guns than people in the country.
Oh, because then he says something about everyone owns a gun. And Simon Pegg is like, what do you mean everyone? He goes, everyone. Well, name someone. Like the farmers? He goes, name someone else. The farmers' mothers? And that was one of the jokes that I loved later, whereas when he finds out what's going on, he's gonna leave for London, and then he has this idea about how to stop everybody. And when he comes in,
and she's
the
a farmer.
the first people that shoot at him is a farmer and his mother. And then the fact that the cop said everyone owns a gun, he goes into town and literally everyone owns a gun.
Yes. So not a line is wasted. Nothing is wasted in this film.
I can't believe you can write a movie like this and have every tiny bit of dialogue, every line that is written pertains to something in the movie. There is not a throwaway line, and that is really hard to do.
Well, especially what I notice is that, especially with Edgar Wright, he doesn't do a lot of improv. Everything's very tightly scripted because many of his gags are visual.
Yeah.
They don't do a lot of improv as opposed, I hate to say something like sort of like the Judd Apatow school of comedy, which I think of something, like your Anchorman is sort of a great example where so much of it is improvised. A lot of it is just kind of goofy scene, next, goofy scene, which may or may not move the plot forward, goofy scene. Like the plot is almost secondary to this kind of goofy improv sketches.
And that becomes a problem for me because I'm not as big a fan of those kind of movies as a lot of people love Anchorman. I didn't like it the first time I watched it. Excuse me. Because when they do that little bit of improv stuff in movies, like the Judd Apatow school. So like all these people that came along with Judd Apatow, like your Seth Rogans and all of this stuff, they do it so much that it just kind of distracts from the story of the movie. And it's like, oh, it's another scene with some improv and they're just going to make some goofy jokes and see how raunchy they can get and just go on and on and on with it. And they never end scenes. And it just
kind of stops.
Yeah. And it makes, even if a joke was funny, they just kind of keep going on with it until it loses its humor.
It beats it into the ground. And then a lot of those movies can seem a lot of overlong. I know some cases like, okay, this scene could probably be cut. This scene could probably be cut. This joke wasn't funny. You should have cut that. This improv string felt a little too long. You cut that, and then
yeah,
a lot of those.
A lot of them are 2 hours, and you can feel the 2 hours. And ironically, though, Hot Fuzz is 2 hours, and it just flies by because it's so tightly constructed.
Very visual. I wish more comedies need to do visual jokes because silent films understood visual jokes. Well, a lot of American comedies, most of it is just kind of goofy, funny lines, occasionally like some gross out humor. So a lot of times if I see like, a new comedy movie's like from the people that brought you whatever, it's like, oh, if it has Judd Apatow's name on it, I've got nothing against him. I like some of his stuff is okay, but like it's just
I'm not going to put down everything he's done. There's plenty of stuff that I've enjoyed, but
then if you say, if you see his name attached to it, I'm
not as excited.
I'm not as excited, or like but it's not a movie I'm not going to completely like not even think about, like sort of the worst school, which would be the Adam Sandler school.
Yeah, that's just gotten bad. Let's not even talk about Adam Sandler unless we're going to talk about Billy Madison or Happy Gilmore.
I haven't seen those movies, and I don't think I have any reason to.
I will stand by those movies, even though they are stupid. It was early enough in his career that his stupidity was funny.
It was
now
novelty?
Now it's just gotten old hat and it's just. But back to a good comedy. They watched Mr. Blower and Ava in a rendition of Romeo and Juliet, where for some reason they're singing "Love Fool" at the end.
Well, there's a great gag even before that, because after his more montages about then it's like after in the police station he's figured everything out. Him and Danny are about to leave. You do anything tonight? I'm going to water my peace lily. Because that's like his one main possession is he has this Japanese peace lily, which he has had for 3 years, taking good care of it. And he remarks, he's taking better care of that than he has Janine, his ex-girlfriend. It's like, Mr. Blower came over and gave you this sort of, and gave you these tickets to her show as an apology. Oh, as an adult, we're not. Oh, as a officer, we're not allowed to accept gifts like that. It's like, oh, okay. And then Bill, then Jim Broadbent comes up. Hey, can you two go to this show as a police presence? Or
yeah. So they end up going anyway. And, and Blower's like, well, I'm glad you could come. He's like,
And one scene we forgot about earlier. That's another important scene, at least for laying out the later plot, is Nicholas goes to see the Neighborhood Watch Association or Alliance meeting, and we're introduced to all sort of the major players in town.
Yeah, and later you find out like the Neighborhood Watch Association abbreviates to NWA, which basically the rap group from the 80s into the night. Well, actually, it was just the 80s, right? And
the famous rap group, NWA.
Yeah, but their biggest thing is F the police, and so it's basically them doing saying, and it really works because it's like at the end it's all, well, we're doing everything for the greater good, so like screw the laws, we're going to do stuff that's for the greater good of the town because we want to be the best. There's judges that come in and they want to be the best town in like the
best village in the country or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a dumb joke, but it's just even how it's abbreviated to NWA is funny because these are all it's a bunch of old white British people.
Yeah, and the thing is that what makes some of these jokes great also is that he doesn't shove it in your face. You have to look for some of these jokes.
Exactly. Like
it's like a bad comedy writer would make it the NWA and someone would point out, is that like the rap group? Blah, blah, blah. They would like spell it out for you. Whereas like, I don't mind that some of the jokes have probably gone over my head in this movie, or I've just missed some. I like the fact that they don't shove it in your face. That it almost makes it funnier, even if it's just a broad joke. or a very specific, like something that wouldn't work in most things. So
Yeah, it doesn't do, I hate the Family Guy thing, which is like, get it? Do you get this reference?
Nudge,
This
nudge.
is nudge, nudge, wink, wink, know what I mean, know what I mean?
So except
This joke is funny, and now I'm going to take 5 minutes to explain it, so it's not funny anymore.
there is one that is thrown in your face though, but because it makes it funnier to throw it in your face is the first murder. There's a murder that happened. There's murders that start happening, but like they first start looking like accidents, then they look more and more like murders. So the first one is Mr. Blower and his mistress are decapitated in a car accident. Well, they call them. He goes, well, we don't call them accidents anymore. We call them collisions because accident implies that there was no foul play. So when this happens, the police are all there and Skinner drives by. And what is the song that's playing on the radio while he's...
I forget.
Oh, God, I wish I would have written it down because it's a song that is just really blatant about the fact that he basically did this or he had a hand in it. Because he shouldn't have even been driving in that area anyway, you learn later.
Yeah, it's like a horrible way to go. And it's another joke that gets repeated whenever something bad happens and someone dies in a quote-unquote accident. It's always a horrible way to go. And I do like this mystic killer is like someone in the dark hood, almost like a Grim Reaper sort of thing going on.
It's almost like the Scream Killer.
A little bit, almost like Ghostface.
Ghostface, yeah. He just doesn't have the mask. He's just like this long
guy in a dark hood,
like, with a hood over and everything. So you don't know who it is the whole time. And
and then this is one of the first time we see this gag. It's like, all right, so Tony Fox says, well, what do you do? And then Nicholas Angel lists off a few things. So we need to cordon off this, keep traffic from looking. We don't want them to see it. And then he gets forensics in here. All right, let's do that.
Here's what he said. So after this whole scene, there's a Simon Pegg and Nick Frost decide at the end of the day to go for a drink. And this is one of the editing scenes that I wanted to bring up was as they're doing this, there's another murder that's going to happen. And now you actually see that it's murder because the killer goes into this house of someone. And as he's going in, Nick Frost and Simon Pegg are coming home from the bar and they're going to sit down and watch Point Break and Bad Boys 2. Simon Pegg's like, which one? And he's like, no, I don't want you to choose one. Which one do you want to watch first? So as they're doing this, there's editing in a way that like you see at the house of the murder, he gets hit in the head and starts falling backwards. And then it cuts to Simon Pegg falling backwards into a chair, and then it just does this back and forth.
Very great cross-cutting, which is this one is especially good because Edgar Wright, and just this film also uses a lot of match cuts for scene transitions.
Yeah,
and it uses that to comedic effect. Match cuts are pretty common, but they're always sort of really nice visually to get. Something you can very easily get used to, so that way when sometimes there's something that's non-matching, a lot of times it can later sort of stand out to the audience.
Yeah. And it's done so well in this scene. It's just like the way it's put together is like, because before the guy gets murdered in the house, he reaches his hand into the fridge and pulls out another beer. And as he like pops it open, then you see like Simon or Nick Frost opening a beer, like it cuts to him opening a beer in his house. And the way it's done is just so natural that like, you don't even realize it's going to the next scene and back and forth like until you actually see a wide shot. And
very serious scene and then a very silly scene.
Yeah.
And I just like their whole parts where they're just kind of like hanging out, drinking. He does a lot of sort of repetition of, first, hands of money, gets 2 beers. Hands of money, gets 2 beers. Hands of money, gets 2 beers as the night goes on. But before that, there's a nice bit of dialogue. It's like, why'd you want to be a cop? Well, it's like, well, I've always wanted to be a cop except the year of 1979 when I wanted to be a frog.
Why you want to be a policeman officer?
Officer, yeah. It's not police force, it's police service. That's another running gag is always sort of correcting other people on the correct,
the vernacular of the
exactly.
It's not policewoman, it's police officer. Policewoman is considered sexist. So they watch Point Break and Bad Boys 2, and they actually show a scene, and they show the scene in Point Break where Keanu Reeves is chasing after the guy in the mask, which is Patrick Swayze. And, he's developed a bond with him in the movie. So, like, instead of shooting him in the back, he just rolls onto his own back and just shoots in the air screaming. And that was another question.
Yeah, this was
another great...
You've never gone and gone down? Never gone down and then started shooting and going and shot up in the air and just gone, no, but it would involve a lot of paperwork.
So they show that scene. And I was reading that Edgar Wright has said that this was one of the most difficult scenes to get into the movie. Even with all of the action in the movie, he said this was the most difficult to put into the movie because the scenes that he showed from the other movies, he had to go and get the permission of everyone who worked on at least that scene. So in that scene, he had to get the permission of Keanu Reeves to air that, and and the director Catherine Bigelow, I'm sure, and then Patrick Swayze. I don't know if Patrick Swayze was already dead at the time and maybe he had to ask the wife. But then also in that scene, even though you don't see the face, it's actually a stunt man going over the fence in Point Break. And so he had to hunt down the stunt man and get his permission to show that scene in his movie. So he had to like run around and get permission from everyone to show this short little clip from Point Break.
And normally this is sort of when you show a scene from another movie in a movie, that generally that's breaking one of the cardinal rules of a movie, because you never want to show something from a movie that's better than yours. But I think this one gets away with it because this movie is just so good. And
because it puts another layer to the pointing out the tropes. So it's like this is supposed to be a real cop duo in the real world because these movies exist and these cops know the tropes of these movies, and Simon Pegg is kind of like, well, those are all ridiculous tropes. So then the fact that he says that and then later he does all the tropes just makes it that much funnier because it's a layer on a layer of the joke.
This film is very pop culture aware in general, sort of the characters, but in like a real person way, not necessarily in like a Josh Whedon-y sort of, I'm going to reference this thing.
Yeah. It's meant to be like real life. So like these movies all exist.
Yes.
Because there's movies in this world. So then after this whole thing, there's
must have been another accident.
There's another accident. The house blows up.
Can we just talk about the Andys just for a moment? The two detectives that are always
dicks.
On the case. Yes,
they're awesome. One is Patty Considine, and one is Rafe Spall, who is the son of Timothy Spall. Who's been in a lot of
one
movies.
Of those actors who's just been in everything.
But Patty Considine is great too, and like I can't pull any movies in particular because he's not a leading man, but he's one of those small actors that like just shows up in a lot of stuff, and I always like him.
But one of my favorite things about the Andys too was just there's a scene where they go out to lunch and then one of them like drinks a beer and then he gets sort of like a beer mustache of foam over his other regular mustache, and then
Simon Pegg's like, "You've got a mustache."
I know. It's just so mean about this. Every time they enter a scene, it's great.
They say something just kind of derogatory to somebody, and there's a lot of like, Simon Pegg is this PC guy, and this cop station is like everyone is so lax and naive about what's going on. It's not like they're bad cops. It's just they're so lax. They're so jokey because it's a small town.
Yeah, it's a small town,
and they don't know that stuff has been going on for a long time. So like they'll make reference to a bunch of like just bad jokes and stuff, and then there's one guy who they'll say a joke about Olivia Colman's like breasts or something like that, and then this one guy, the one cop who doesn't say much, just goes tits. It just there's another one later where he just goes cock. So it's just one word, like just derogatory word, just
thrown in there,
just thrown in a dirty word because we made a joke about it. But then we have a church scene. There's this big festival going on, and we've also have we already met Lurch by this time?
Oh, yeah,
who is just this tall guy who is he works at the store that Skinner owns, and
because this is a great scene earlier where it's during this section where it's just Danny and Nick just doing their police work. Is like first things first. It's like, why? There's nothing going on. There's always something going on. This has one of the very few, I think, like, it might be the only continuity error you notice in this film is when they're talking about people. At one point, you see Danny, like, finishing his ice cream cone.
Okay.
And then later they cut back to him and it's back. So it just might have been what the order was shot. So.
Oh.
But that's like the one thing.
And now that you've pointed that out, I'm going to notice it every time I watch this movie.
That's just a very, 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 very tiny thing.
And those I can let slide.
You can get away with
there's
it.
only one time that there's one movie that I think is fantastic, and there's an editing error at the end that just pisses me off. And it just like ruins like everything. and that's in American History X. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
I haven't. I think that's the one where it's like neo-Nazi Edward Norton. And it turns out that like Brad Pitt was all in his head the whole time or something.
Not quite, but yeah, yeah. No, it's the neo-Nazi movie, but there's an editing error at the end, and it's during a very like the dramatic end scene, and it just like it's so blatant that like it was shot at different times or they had to reshoot it or something that it just throws me off every time. And I'm going, this is such a dramatic, really emotional scene, and then there's that goddamn piece of paper that's over there, and now it's over there.
Yeah, some stuff is just. I mean, I can understand most of the stuff because once again, movies are made by humans. Humans are flawed. Continuity errors happen all the time. Sometimes they're fun to point out. Other times it doesn't really matter. In this one, it doesn't really matter.
It's not that bad. It's in the middle of the movie, and it's actually not even it's not a plot heavy
it's just
editing error. Whereas like the one in American History X, it's very that piece of paper is actually symbolic of something.
It actually means something.
It actually means something.
He's not just eating an ice cream.
No, he's holding on to a piece of paper, and then the next shot it's way over there, and then the next shot it's in his hand again. It's like, But so they have this. Oh, so we met Lurch.
Lurch, who's at Michael Armstrong. He works at the grocery store, and then he lives with his sister and his mother.
He's the tall henchman that's like simple-minded.
Yeah, it's like, oh, are they like him? Tall? Who is his sister and his mother? Oh, same person.
Okay, but yeah, he's the simple-minded one, and the only word that he ever says in the movie is "yarp."
It's like, Michael, could you take care of this for me? Yarp.
So anyway, like that was met earlier. Then we go to a church scene where, now there's been 2 accidents, and there's a reporter in the town that just kind of shows up everywhere, and his name is Messenger. Yeah. And the thing is everyone's name is even like that's another thing that was written into the script is everyone's name pertains to like the job that they do. Yeah,
Simon Messenger.
There's the Butcher
Simon
twins.
Skinner. Yeah,
and then Messenger is the reporter, and and then there's a lady later who works at a florist shop, and her name has something to do with I can't remember what.
Like Tilly something.
Yeah, Tiller. It was Tiller.
Yeah,
because a lot of them end in ER. Messenger, Skinner, Tiller, Butcher.
Yeah.
But they're all like occupation names.
That's funny.
And so he's learning something, and then this is the first time you see like a really gory scene. Actually, there's like full on like the violence is just shown, where a steeple gets pushed onto his head, and it goes point down into the top of his head, down through his neck, and then he's walking around before he falls down with just like his head is gone, it's exploded, and it's just like a steeple there.
And of course, there's another great rule of 3 gag over where because the whole church thing is the whole auction over by this festival is to help raise money to like restore the church's roof, which is a visual thing you see because that's where the money for the swear box goes. This is everyone is sort of working together to donate money for this cause, and then as part of this fair, they see there's like a rifle shoot. It's like an air rifle thing.
Yeah,
and then it just goes. This is run by the town doctor. He says, "Oh, okay, let's go. Well, it's like this much gives you this banana, this much gives you this, and if you shoot all 5 of these tiny people in the back, you get the big monkey." And then he gives Danny hands it to Nicholas. Nicholas just goes, pumps the air rifle. It's here, do really fast, and then he just gets the monkey, and then he hands it to Danny. Danny shoots the air rifle and hits the doctor.
And then that's
like,
even
he's a doctor. He'll deal with it. And that's another one is like winning the monkey is even for a throwaway like comedy line later where
the cops are all actually pissed off at Simon Pegg because they're like, nothing happens in this town. They're all accidents. Stop trying to say that there's oh, is it another murder? It's like, you just love your murders, don't you? And
let's take you and the monkey and get out of here.
The two Andys come by and it was like, why don't you and the monkey go do your whatever or something? And Nick Frost just like is behind him. He lifts up the monkey and goes, was he talking about me or this monkey? And so it's just like another thing where it's just like, it was for a throwaway joke, but it wasn't wasted.
Everything pays off in this film. That is what we have to say. It's very tightly made, tightly edited. And everything pays off. When you think something doesn't pay off, it normally does if it's only within the same scene or if it's called back to later in the film, which is a very hard thing to do.
Yeah. And then this is where the point where, so after he gets done, it's Nick Frost's birthday the next day and he doesn't realize it. So then as they're at the station, Nick Frost is all mopey from the day before and so then
they had a falling out.
They've had a falling out, and Simon Pegg is like, "Oh, well, why didn't you tell me it was your birthday? Because we've been fighting all day, and we've been like, hey, whatever." And so he goes, and then he decides he's gonna go run an errand and buy a peace lily for him, and he witnesses a murder and actually chases after the guy.
I love this scene because because it makes a note. You always have your notebook on you early in the film, so then he goes to the flower shop, leaves his put his notebook on the dashboard, goes out, talks to the flower lady. She starts spilling the beans and things the wheels kind of start clicking.
Yeah.
And then I still like that scene with the tillers, the ladies just goes, "Oh, you got to go here," and they'll, "Yes, God rest his soul." And this is every time God rest his soul, God rest their soul.
Well, because Blower did this. God rest his soul, did this, and then
Merchant, God rest his soul.
It's just over and over and over. It says their names multiple times.
Then you see him kind of thinking, he's like, "I'll be right back." Goes, grabs his notebook, and then, of course, in the background, you see that the hooded figure comes up and then just kind of stabs Mrs. Tiller with shears. right
in the neck with a giant pair of shears, like hedging shears or something like that. And so then he goes back to the station and he's like, "Well, I witnessed a murder." He goes, "Another murder? How do you know it wasn't an accident?" "I was there." He goes, "Why were you there?" "To buy him a peace lily." And they go, and they go, "Well, how do you know it was a murder?" "Because I was there and I witnessed it." He goes, "Well, the only explanation could be that you did it then." The two Andys you're right, they're fantastic.
Yes. And then one thing we forgot to point out during an earlier chase scene was that, of course, this being part of the trilogy, we get one of the famous gags was, "Have you never taken a shortcut before?"
Yes. And then,
which in Shaun of the Dead is, it always involves like Simon Pegg jumping a fence. And I love this because he's like, "Have you never taken a shortcut before?" Then he jumps the fence, he goes through like a series of fences, jumping around flips or something. Something crazy.
He completely flips over the last one. And then Nick Frost goes, and just the first one he just plows through and falls over. And then he like gets over the next one and falls over. So yeah, I think that gag is in all three of the movies at some point. So But so then this is the point where he's like, okay, this is a murder and I know who did it. It's Skinner. And so he goes and confronts Skinner at his store, and Skinner has alibis, of course. And then he gets this, and then he goes to the store and gets the idea that it might be multiple killers, because what the clerk says something about, "Did you take care of them killers yet out there?" And just mocking him for thinking everything's a murder. And
he's just like,
killers.
Of course, then we get one of those. There's another montage, which seems like in every sort of cop detective movie, there's always one of these montages, sort of a research montage where he goes to the library, looks at all the papers, and of course, one of the jokes about this journalist, and he's looking at the papers, is always like everything was misspelled. So like, he spelled like Detective Angle was
instead of Angel, and then he finds out like everything is linked through this whole like scheme. Like there's a real estate deal where, like, it's one of those convoluted things where it's like they're gonna bring a road through the town, so they're buying up property, and then if you own property next to the road, it's gonna go up in value because the road's gonna be right next to it. Mm-hmm. So he's like, oh, Skinner is
it's always him, yeah, it's good,
because he wants to buy up this land, but he's got his alibis, and so that's a dead end for him and the cops. And then he goes back to his hotel and meets Yarp.
And then it's sad, like, oh yeah, everything is fine, blah, blah, blah. Nothing really matters. He had his case. Maybe it is all just accidents.
And that's another one of my favorite lines where he actually gets the one up on Yarp and knocks him out. And Skinner actually gets on the radio confirming that it's him. He goes, Did you take care of Michael? Did you take care of him? And Simon Pegg's like, Yarp. So he's down. Yarp. So Angel's not getting up again, is he? Narp.
Yep, there's another rule of 3. It's everywhere.
So that was one of my favorite jokes, the Yarp Narp joke. So this is where it just all kind of like snowballs at the end.
Yeah,
and
very much.
And he finds a cult, because there's always a cult. And it's the NWA like chanting for the greater good, for the greater good. And he breaks it up, and Danny comes in with Yarp because he left Danny at his hotel to watch over Yarp to go find this guy.
Yeah.
And he stabs him.
Like, he's in on it too. They're in on it too. Everyone's in on it. I like the scene where he's running away from the cult, and then like sort of he falls down into this ditch or whatever, and he sees like all the other people that they've killed. Yeah. Like, gypsies, dog muck, the statue
guy.
The statue.
There is a human statue in this movie that like there's one guy who monitors the whole town.
Yeah.
He's just sitting in a room with a bunch of monitors with security cameras all over the town. He's like always like, our number one nemesis, the living statue. And then later it's our number one nemesis, the Swan.
And then I just love how like they even killed the living statue. Like so he's just frozen in position.
So yeah, and he thinks that Danny's in on it because he stabs him, but then later like he gets him out of the trunk. And that's what I didn't understand, is why Danny stabbed him, because then Danny's like, well, nothing's really going on, and he's like, Danny's just clueless.
Yeah, actually, he's pretty clueless.
Because his dad is actually the leader of this whole NWA thing.
Yeah, because I find his whole backstory, it's because of his wife and all this.
Yeah.
She spent so much time with it, then she lost the village, blah, blah, blah.
And then he's like, well, no, like there's dead bodies everywhere. And Danny finally believes him, but he goes, well, there's nothing we can do. So Peg's like, oh, I'm going back to London. And on his way back, he stops at a convenience store and looks over at a discount rack. And right next to each other is Point Break and Bad Boys 2.
He's like, wait a minute.
I've got an idea.
Get some spray paint and other stuff. And then just goes over. He's like, oh, and it's like, will that be everything? Yes. And there's another great rule of 3 gag is, we should close up, hands him the money, but leaves a coin. But he hands him the money, a few coins, and then like part of a Cornetto wrapper. And you see on the counter, it's just like, takes the cash, takes the coin, puts back and there's even a sound effect where it's like, bum, bum, bum.
Oh, yeah, I really need to check some of these rule of 3s that like I just didn't click with me, and I'm going to have to go back and watch this again because
it's a pretty common comedy thing, so it's...
Yeah.
But I just kept noticing it all over in this particular movie.
Well, and so he sees the 2 movies, and then he decides to go back. And this is where I was saying that like the first people to shoot at him was a farmer and his mother. And this was a great scene because the mom he takes out the farmer, and then the mom shoots at him, and she's behind a fence. So he runs and jumps up in the air and drop kicks her. Yeah, she's got like a broken nose. just an old woman back there. And so then he goes into town. And earlier in the movie, him and Danny were like the one where he goes, something's always going on. He goes, look at that guy. Why does he have a long coat on? I don't know. Maybe he's cold. And it's like, look at that person over there. And then look at this person. And then when he goes back into town, all of them still are the same way. And they pull guns out of everything.
Yes, everyone has a gun. There's guns everywhere because
some lady on a bike is pulling guns out of her basket.
Yeah, because there's more guns than people in the country.
And so then he's starting a gunfight with everybody in town, and finally Danny is just sitting there watching, and he finally like knocks the girl off her bike with his car door, and he joins in, and they do the little twirl around from Bad Boys 2 where the camera goes around both of them.
The Michael Bay spin around.
Yeah. I guess it's not just a Bad Boys 2 thing. It's a Michael Bay thing.
It's a Michael Bay thing. Michael Bay's basic thing, if you notice in all of his movies, and even before that, when he worked in commercials, his commercials are pretty good. And his famous, he makes everything look big and expensive, even when it isn't, which is why he was so good at doing commercials, because even when a movie wasn't necessarily very expensive, even a commercial, he always goes for maximum impact and maximum amount of visual information, which is why if you check out his, just put in Michael Bay Got Milk. It's a really good commercial. It's actually won a few awards, and it's kicked off the whole Got Milk ad campaign, was this one particular ad.
Oh, nice.
So,
I don't think I've seen any of his commercials. I didn't realize he did commercials before. Which, I mean, a lot of directors start out that way, but I just didn't realize. And this was the crossword... where this time she yells out fascist
and then starts shooting a machine gun at him.
He's like, hag, and shoots back at her.
And then he gets with the doctor joke again, where the doctor takes Angel hostage and then drop the gun, Danny. He does. He just kind of throws the gun, makes it fire, shoots off the gun, got his toes
was it the doctor again?
Yeah.
Yes.
You're a doctor.
You'll deal with
it. Yeah, mother.
Well, and then both of them get to do the jumping through the air and firing both guns at the same time.
Which is, I think that's more of a John Woo thing.
The two guns firing while jumping across the screen is
the only way to make it more John Woo is if there were doves.
And I was seeing in the trivia, and I must have just missed it, that apparently there was one scene where he walks through some birds, John Woo style, and
nice.
They fly off. And it might have been just subtle enough that I just kind of missed it, because that's another, John Woo does it so much that even in Mission Impossible 2, they're down in a bunker, and for some reason there's doves in a room, so when Tom Cruise comes running out in slow-mo, there's doves flying out slow-mo. Why are there doves in a bunker?
Who cares?
What is this?
It looks cool. It's an action movie.
But then again, the whole time you watch Mission Impossible 2, you're going, why is this? Why is that? This doesn't make sense.
I think I've seen I've only seen the odd number entries in Mission Impossible. I've seen 1, 3, and 5, and I'm not sure how or why. I think I saw
those are all good.
I think I saw one on TV or something, and then I saw 3 because I wanted to see it. I was around 13 or 14 at the time.
The only one I don't like is the John Woo one, number 2.
And then I think I've seen and I saw 5 in theaters. Didn't see. So I haven't seen 2, 4, or 6. I don't know why that is.
Oh, 6 might be on my top 10 list for 2018, actually.
All I know is that's the one that was the mustache.
The Henry Cavill mustache was. He was filming
the CG the magic lip of Justice League, which is because that's obviously the one problem with that film was the lip. Had nothing to do with anything else or how it was structurally or changed. No. Definitely. The only problem with that film, it's a perfect movie otherwise, is the magic lip.
Yeah. Awesome.
P.S. There is no Snyder cut.
No, which is sad, because I actually like the longer cut of Batman v Superman.
It's better?
Yes, it actually is. I think it legitimately is better.
It's better, but it doesn't change
it's not.
Doesn't save
it's still
the
not a
film.
great movie.
It's not a good movie.
But I like that movie, and I like the longer cut better.
Okay, you're allowed to your opinion.
I realize everything that's wrong with the movie, and I realize why people hate it, and I don't mind that other people hate the movie. Yeah, so
anyway, save Martha. I just had to get it in there.
Why'd you say that name?
I just like the reaction of the internet had so now apparently when everyone says the name Martha, Batman just starts crying.
My biggest problem is, why do people focus on that when there's so many other problems with the movie?
Oh, I agree. How he kills a bunch of people.
It's murder Batman.
Then don't forget, he sends a file to how Bruce sends a file to Wonder Woman, and it's just hey, the email might as well be titled Justice League trailer.
Here's some clips of some.
There's so many things going wrong with that movie in so many ways. Granny's peach tea never made sense to me.
Oh, yeah.
Just Jesse Eisenberg's performance it's had an interesting idea, but like a lot of the film, it sounds great on paper, but it was just very poor execution, a lot of things.
Yeah.
Anyway, so back to a good movie with great editing. We're almost done.
There's a whole big shootout, and then finally there's the chase down of Skinner, and this is great because they're chasing him, and there's a swan in the road that makes Skinner fly off, and because of the whole production thing, there's a model of the town, and he flies off into that in his car, and then the Peg and Frost see the swan, they're like, Swan, and then they actually stop instead of veering off and they pick up the Swan and put it in the back seat.
Yeah, but they've been looking for it the whole movie.
Yeah, and when they get into the town, this is another joke that we didn't mention, but is another great one. Is and I hope that you guys all pause this before because we're spoiling a lot of jokes, but you still need to watch it because they pull them off. But earlier in the movie, when he's saying something about murders going on in the town, the two Andys go, well, what are we supposed to do to find these murders? Just go through the phone book and dial everyone starting with Aaron A. Aronson. and they get to the model, and there's a boy just wandering around looking at the model, and Simon Pegg at one point says something, and he goes, what's your name, kid? He goes, hi, I'm Aaron A. Aronson. It's just like... Just because they had to like make that payoff.
And don't forget during the big shootout in the middle of this small town, which adds another layer of humor because in an action movie you want everything to be big, even when your big shootouts take place across an entire city. But then this movie has a shootout in once again, all this crazy action stuff happens in a small village in rural England, which just makes it funny.
Yeah.
We got a big car chase. Is he jumping over? It looks like he's jumping down a big city. No, it's a miniature town. It's funny.
And it's a miniature of a miniature town.
Yes, it's a miniature of a tiny village.
And so then they start fighting in the town. It looks like Godzilla's fighting over Tokyo or something. It's just and they're falling over the buildings and stuff. When Skinner loses his gun, I didn't notice this, but I think it said somewhere that his gun slides into the model of his store. And then when he trips on a delivery truck. So
nice.
and then this is another violent part that is just gross, where it's Skinner trips and just slow motion falls and just wham, a church steeple goes up through his
mouth,
chin, and is coming out his mouth. So it's just up through his chin, and he's just something.
This hurts. I want some ice cream.
I'm going to need some ice cream.
There's plenty of ice cream at the station.
That was another running joke. Is somehow punishment at the station is by making everyone eat more dessert.
Yeah.
So, which I think is just playing off the fact that Simon Pegg is always so health conscious in the movie, because you got to keep fit. I always run, I bike and all that. So, he gets that through the chin, and then Danny sees his dad running away because his dad is a mastermind in all of this with the NWA, and he gets to do the Point Break scene where he's I can't shoot my dad, so he just turns on his back.
And then of course then he gets into Danny and Nick's car and then starts driving off into the field, and they just kind of watch. But then as he's sort of slowly driving away, you just hear a honk of a swan, and then
he just slowly runs into a tree.
Yes. And then the cops
out in the middle of a field.
And then the cops from the beginning show up. They're all back. It's hey, we wanted you back. Our numbers are really down and we need you back. It's which was another sort of, we've been calling for days, and that's another joke that goes back throughout the movies. Tell them, oh, you got a call from London. Tell them I'll call them back.
Yeah.
And then later he's when he's kind of in full action man mode, and he's trying to go out to the town after going to the police station to get all these guns. He just looks at the guy at the front desk. You got a phone from London. I'll tell them you'll call them back.
Yeah. And then there's all the mention of everything takes a lot of paperwork, and this is something Edgar Wright wanted to put in because they did interview cops for this movie, different police stations and stuff. And apparently one town, Pegg and Frost, this is just a side note, Pegg and Frost went into the town, and the cops were mistakenly told that they were reporters, so they wouldn't talk to them.
Oh no.
And but they did talk to other cops for this, and something that they noticed that a lot of cops say is no one ever puts the fact that there's a lot of paperwork in their movies. They never mention the fact that all crimes require a lot of paperwork.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why it's just this running thing, and here's well, shooting your gun in there, that's going to be a lot of paperwork,
It's yeah, we got so much paperwork to do.
Yeah, so then they're all doing paperwork, and who is it? The doctor comes in.
No, it's the guy running the security cameras.
Oh, was it him? Okay.
Because he kind of gets forgotten towards the end.
Yeah, and he comes in with a musket. And Danny takes a musket shot for Pegg.
No, and then he goes and goes back into the evidence room, and then we get the
C mine
again.
C mine clicks and turns on and just blows up the police station. But then this is another visual gag where like you see Danny take a bullet and then the police station blow up and they're like, oh God, no. And he finds Danny and he looks,
and stuff.
They're all covered in ashes and you don't know whether Danny made it or not.
Danny's
and then
on the ground. It's like, Danny, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Pan up into the sky.
And then it cuts to 1 year later and he goes to the graveyard and you see like, it comes over his shoulder and all you see is the last name, Butterman.
Flowers, yeah.
And he's going to put it on. He's like, I hope these are the right flowers. And then it pans over and it's actually Danny's mom's grave. And
and then Danny's like, next to him is like, yeah, she'll love him.
she'll like those. But then so they do that. And then it's 1 year later. So that means they're still partners on the force in this small village. And then we get another Point Break reference, which is the last line of the movie where Simon, they're in the car and something happens. So they have to speed off and Simon goes, Sergeant Butterman, Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll. He goes, bring on the noise. And then just cut.
Yeah, it's this, as we said before, and we'll probably keep saying, this movie is great. It's so funny. There's so many gags. We couldn't even get nearly through all of them because this movie is 2 hours long. And it's just chock full to the brim of gags. Everyone has their own favorite. And of course,
as much as we spoiled, there's so many more things to see in this.
And what I love about Edgar Wright, and especially this trilogy, is that it's great for viewing multiple times just because of the sheer amount of joke density. And the Lego movie and Lego Batman movie did this too. There's so many jokes just actually packed to the gills of all these different kinds of jokes where it rewards you because you go back and, as Kyle, you said you've seen this movie like 4 or 5 times and you always notice more stuff the more times you see it.
This time I was watching going, I didn't notice that before. I didn't notice that before. It was just like, oh, that's funny. And, this was the first time I noticed the little thing with the sign behind his head, on the bulletin board. They're pointing like all the different like attributes to this guy. and apparently there's a lot of stuff in there that you need to watch out for that kind of gives hints to the people in the town that they are like going to be the bad guys at the end too. So
yeah, and that's another thing that kind of was something similar to that happened in The World's End, where the movie opens with his Simon Pegg's character Gary, I believe, is telling this whole story of this epic bar crawl that they attempted, but they didn't make it all the way through. And then over the course of the movie, the exact same thing happens. They don't make it through the bar crawl in almost the exact same way.
And then The World's End has like every bar that they go to, the name of the bar references something that's going to happen in that, like within that scene. So it's so much attention to detail, like even in the places, the people's names, that's one thing I like about Edgar Wright is his attention to detail to everything, which, like you said, makes his movies so rewatchable. Even
in something like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which was made in between Hot Fuzz and The World's End. So you could probably put it as like an asterisk as part of the trilogy because it has a lot of the same visual type of humor, even though it's a very completely different film and adaptation of a comic, which is another great movie, which maybe we'll cover on this sometime.
Well, I hope so. It'll give me a reason to watch that one again because I saw that in the theater and I loved it, but I have not revisited it yet.
It's got a lot of great video game centric visual jokes.
Yeah.
Like at the very end where he meets Nega Scott, the evil dark version of him, because of course there's an evil dark version of you in a video game. And,
always.
Nega Scott is actually really nice because regular Scott, the more you think about him, he's a terrible person.
So, do we even need to ask, would you recommend this movie?
I would recommend this movie to everyone, and I would also recommend, if you're really interested in this or just interested in filmmaking in general, Ava DuVernay said this, that the cheapest film school is the DVD commentary.
Yeah, and I wish I had like a DVD of this because, we do this podcast based on our streaming services. We randomly select a movie from our streaming services, and I don't happen to own this one, so I watched it on Netflix, which is what it popped up on for us. And so there is a DVD commentary on this one, and I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I have a nice box, or I wish I had like a proper box set, but this is to just put all 3 movies in like the same case, which has sort of all tons of extras for each and every single one of them. It's a nice Blu-ray set, which has all 3 in the Cornetto trilogy, and that's what I have. So I'd recommend that. You could probably get it for like $20 and gets all 3 of these movies easily with tons of extras.
And I would recommend this movie to anyone who likes comedies, anyone who likes action movies, and I would recommend this movie to anyone who likes movies. So
I agree. It's so much fun.
This is my favorite movie that I've watched for this podcast. This is a 5-star movie out of 5 stars. It's top notch.
Yes.
We're doing 90% and better on Rotten Tomatoes now with our movies, and this one is a 91% with critics and an 89% on audiences, and I think that's too low. I really love this movie that much.
Yeah, it definitely gets better the more times you watch it, and you can't say that for everything.
No, you can't.
Like Batman v Superman.
Keeps getting funnier every single time I see it.
Thank you, Michael Keaton.
I don't have much in the way of trivia other than a few things I've thrown in there, but this opened on 4/20/07, and it opened in 6th place on that weekend. So. But that's about all I've got. And Rotten Tomatoes scores 91%. 89 audience, like I said. Too low. Go watch it. It's great. So now...
Excellent movie from an excellent director. Just everything about it.
And I'd recommend anything Edgar Wright does. Even The World's End, which I didn't like as much, is still...
It's still a
really
great
good
movie.
It's still a really good movie, yeah. So, and Baby Driver and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. And so now, what would you recommend as a double feature with this one?
Well, there's the obvious choice, which I'm not going to say.
I'm going to give an obvious choice.
Okay,
so that's
go
probably
ahead and go first.
I'm going to give the obvious choice of. There's actually a lot of obvious choices, I think, but for me, it's one of the movies they reference a few times, and they ended on one of the lines. The last line of the movie is from my choice, and that is, "I am an FBI agent." Point Break.
So that's kind of lost on me. I've never seen Point Break.
Oh, it is so fantastic. And yes, is it a little bit cheesy now because it was 1991, but I rewatched it after watching this week, and I still love that movie. Keanu Reeves is an FBI agent who has to infiltrate. If you've ever seen Fast and Furious, people say that it is basically Point Break. It really is. It plot point for plot point is Point Break. Keanu Reeves, FBI agent. His partner is Gary Busey, which is great, and their commanding officer is John C. McGinley. And this is the movie where you get the line from John C. McGinley: "I know your type, young, dumb, and full of cum."
But I think it's awesome that Catherine Bigelow was the person that brought us such an adrenaline testosterone.
No, and that's what I wanted to say. Is another reason that you should always bring up this movie is because even if it has aged a little bit, I still think it's just a fun movie. There are some parts that are just it's early 90s, but this is one of the most applauded dude bro movies ever made. It's highly regarded. Most guys love this movie, and it was directed by a woman in 1991. So why do we have to have this Me Too movement that's going on right now? Why can't we see stuff like this and go, just let anybody direct?
Well, I mean, I'd love that, but unfortunately it's a systemic problem.
Oh, and I realize that, but that's why it's great to bring up a movie like this, is because
agree.
It's point this out and go, hey, what's your favorite action movie of the 90s? A lot of people are going to go, oh, I love Point Break. Yeah, that's directed by
Catherine Bigelow. She's great.
It is a dude bro movie.
Oh,
it's
through and through.
It is surfer dudes, and it's Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves, and it's awesome. And it was directed by a woman, so it's just great all around. And I love. I mean, Patrick Swayze wasn't in a lot of great movies, but the movies that he was in that I love.
He was in Roadhouse.
I love Roadhouse.
Roadhouse is a masterpiece of filmmaking. I will die on that hill.
I love Roadhouse. I love Point Break. I love Dirty Dancing.
And if you don't like Roadhouse, you're too stupid to have a good time.
That movie is ridiculous in the greatest way.
It is very 80s-tastic.
But
it's a time capsule.
But I stand by Point Break being actually just a legit good movie, too. because Catherine Bigelow is a good filmmaker. And maybe this was one of her earlier movies, so it's not as refined as some of her later movies, but you can see why she's become such a big name, because this was... It really is fun for all of the stupid stuff that is like a crazy Gary Busey as the partner.
Well, I think that's just Gary Busey.
I guess saying crazy is kind of redundant.
It is redundant when you speak
after
Gary
a certain
Busey.
point in his career, and I don't know when he had his motorcycle accident, if it was pre or post Point Break, but then he just got even nuttier. So
are you saying that his performance in Ginger Dead Man is not one of subtlety, grace, and can be combined and used in the same sentence as Laurence Olivier?
I can't say I've seen Ginger Dead Man. I've seen the trailer for it.
I think that's enough.
Yeah, I thought so watching the trailer. So anyway, yeah, I think it'd be a great like double feature. I think you should watch Point Break first and then just go into, because you're going to get like the adrenaline, action-packed movie, and then you go into Hot Fuzz that kind of takes the piss out of the action a little bit and just
in a loving way.
In a loving way, and gives you a little bit of lightheartedness and just fun. So,
and I think I'm gonna go in a different direction. I'd recommend this one to go as well as this one. And another kind of parody that still works on the same material. I'd probably go with The Naked Gun.
That's a good choice,
because that's definitely it's an older school kind of sort of parody. Not quite in the same way. Definitely nowhere near as tight. But still just joke after joke after joke. It's definitely more of an older traditional parody film from the same people who brought you Airplane, with Leslie Nielsen, who is just playing it straight throughout the whole film, and just everyone is having a great time.
Oh, then I can't believe Leslie Nielsen is the guy who used to be nobody knows him as a dramatic actor, but he's the one who got in a fight with a grizzly bear because the grizzly bear interrupted him raping a woman in a movie.
Yeah, it's Day of the Animals. I've seen that film.
I know I've mentioned it before on this podcast, but it's just like I can't get over the.
That was that happened, and then he's killed off screen. But everyone knows that he and that grizzly bear just enough.
And then it was Airplane that turned him into a comedic actor.
Yep. Also, if you want to go really far back, he was in the old Forbidden Planet, which was a huge influence on Star Wars. So
now
back in the 50s.
Naked Gun, watching that now, can you watch it and not just think murderer whenever you see O.J. Simpson?
Yeah, that's really weird. I'm glad he's not in it he's in it very shortly.
Well, the thing is like he's actually I haven't seen that in so long, but I remember O.J. Simpson actually being pretty funny in the movie too. Actually.
Yeah, he doesn't say anything. He just gets hurt at the beginning, and then that's it.
Was that? I thought he was in it more, or was he in 2 and 3 more?
He was probably in 2 and 3 more.
Because I remember him being pretty funny, and maybe it was in the other 2. So
yeah, he's barely in it, and also just remember that's when Naked Gun is coming out of Police Squad.
Yes,
which was their show, which only lasted 6 episodes, which I think is a crime in itself, just because that was a parody of every sort of 1970s, 1980s type of cop show. Kind of running on the heels of that school, but kind of before the more modern stuff that we're used to after stuff like Hill Street Blues and The Wire and Life on the Killing Streets or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's my recommendation for a double feature.
That's great. That's another, going comedy route, and actually 2 different kind of parodying action movies, but in a completely different way. So like it would be like watching something fresh like both times. So but still doing kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting 2 different takes on the same basic material. So nice companion pieces.
Yeah. So now we go to our Wheel of Fate here. Wheel of Fish.
Spatula City.
You're so stupid.
Of course, that's from UHF, which is the movie that Weird Al made, which is dumb, but in the best sort of way.
It's dumb fun. I rewatched that a couple weeks ago.
Yes. Spatula City. Spatula City.
That's my mop. They took my mop.
From what I understand, the billboard, they made a billboard of Spatula City. It's the Spatula City next exit. After the film was completed, no one else bought this space, so that billboard was up there for a while after the movie was finished.
That's awesome.
So just confusing people. So imagine if you turned off like in like the late 80s, you're actually looking like, wait, where's Spatula City?
Off exit 84, Spatula City. Okay, so 90% or better.
Yes.
And then Do we want to go we went comedy last time.
Okay.
Or no, I think we did just whatever and it came up.
Yeah.
Do we want a good fantasy, science fiction? We tried musical once and that just didn't work. It came up with like a lot of musical biopics or documentaries and stuff. But
let's do a fantasy.
Fantasy, okay.
I hope it's that one movie with like shirtless Tom Hanks and he fights the devil or whatever. I think that's supposed to be Legend. Yeah, that's what
Tom Cruise.
No, I wish it was Tom Hanks.
I was like, wait a minute, Tom Hanks didn't fight the devil, did he? I doubt that Legend is a 90% or better with critics.
Maybe.
It might be with the audience if they're all grew up in the 80s. So
I just remember, like, doesn't he go in there with like without pants or something at one point? Because remember, I haven't seen it, but like he's going through like all the muck to get to like the bad guy, like, and he chooses to do this without shoes or pants. Who does that?
Okay, I'm gonna read you the synopsis here, since you're not seeing the screen. When a princess is shrunken by an evil wizard, Sinbad must undertake a quest to an island of monsters to cure her and prevent a war.
Oh no.
This is
the comedian Sinbad? Not
yes. In Jingle All the Way 2. No, this is on Prime Video. It is 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. 1958's The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad.
I've actually seen this film. It's got Ray Harryhausen effects, so we'll have a lot to talk about there.
That is going to be a good thing. So I think I've seen this one too. I love Ray Harryhausen, so I am going to enjoy watching this one again if I have seen it. I know I've seen a few of his movies. Clash of the Titans is the one I watched over and over as a kid. But I think this is the one that has the
this one has Medusa.
The fighting skeleton. No,
I believe that's Jason and the Argonauts is the skeletons.
Oh, that was Jason and the Argonauts. Okay,
yeah.
Medusa was Clash of the Titans.
Okay.
So so I'm not even sure if I've seen Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. So I'm excited to watch this one.
Yeah, and let's see, where can we find you on the interwebs?
You can find me on Twitter at AwesomeKM. Did you write yours down this time?
No, I forgot to write one down this time.
Okay, so I think it is at Noah_Saturn.
On Twitter?
On Twitter.
Not on Tumblr?
Not, I don't know. Are you on Tumblr?
I'm not on Tumblr.
I'm not.
All my fanfic got taken off Tumblr.
I am also on Instagram, but that has nothing to do with any of my movie stuff. So
it's just pictures of your kids and your cat.
Yeah, pretty much. No. So that's the show for today, and so until next time,
always use your swear jar.
Cock.